You see it everywhere, right? I mean, it's scrawled on a brightly colored sticky note stuck to some bathroom mirror.
Oh, yeah. Or whispered in that quiet, vulnerable moment at the end of a yoga class.
Exactly, or, printed in cursive on a coffee mug. Just 6 simple words, I am perfect as I am.
Right.
And usually when you encounter that phrase, you fully expect it to be this warm, fuzzy, self-help affirmation, like a gentle little pat on the back to get you through a tough Tuesday.
Which is how it's almost always marketed to us.
Totally. But today's deep dive is built on a single, really fascinating philosophical essay that takes those 6 words and just turns them completely upside down.
It really does.
The source material reveals that I am perfect as I am isn't a fluffy feel-good mantra at all. It is actually wildly destabilizing. I mean, it's an incredibly radical ontological claim about the very nature of your existence.
And that shift in perspective is, honestly, it's monumental.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider how most spiritual traditions and therapeutic methods, even the incredibly well-meaning ones, right,
Sure.
how they tend to handle this idea.
Huh.
Because they hedge. They don't give it to you straight. You're usually told that you are worthy of love despite your flaws.
Right. You're broken, but we love you anyway.
Exactly. Or you might hear that you're made in the image of something divine, which conveniently places the actual perfection just, slightly outside of your messy, human, everyday self.
That hedge feels so familiar. It's almost like a safety net we put around the concept so we don't get too arrogant or something.
Yeah, but the essay we are diving into argues that this hedge is actually a mechanism. It maintains what it calls an ancient economy of spiritual lack.
Mm.
Because if you are perfectly whole entirely on your own,
Right, in this exact second.
right, then you don't need a mediator. You don't need a specific self-help book or a guru or like a relentless corrective practice to restore something that you supposedly lost.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to figure out what actually happens to a human life when we completely refuse that economy of lack.
And to even begin refusing it, we have to basically rescue the word perfect from how it gets thrown around in everyday life.
Like, strip it of all its comparative baggage.
Yes, because in normal life, perfect is entirely relational. It requires an external standard.
Okay, like what?
Well, think about a perfect score on a math test or a perfect circle drawn on a piece of paper by a machine. Those concepts only exist because there is a frame of reference, a ruler to measure against.
Right.
If you take away the ruler, the modern usage of the word perfect just dissolves. It doesn't even make sense anymore.
My brain immediately jumps to the question, perfect compared to what?
Right. We're so conditioned to grade ourselves.
We are constantly grading. But if we go back to the Latin root of the word, which is perfectus,
Okay.
we find a definition that has absolutely nothing to do with performance or evaluation. Perfectus simply means completed, brought fully into being.
Brought fully into being. That's so different.
It does not mean optimized, and it certainly does not mean idealized. It just means brought forth into existence completely. So under that specific definition, a stone is perfect.
Yes. A stone is perfectly a stone. A wildfire is perfect.
Wow.
And to bring it into the human experience, the text says a person sitting in agonizing grief or deep confusion.
In the middle of a life that is absolutely falling apart.
Exactly. That person is perfect.
Mm.
And the distinction here is crucial. It is not because the grief is pleasant or the confusion is desirable. It is because the grief is genuinely happening.
The person is genuinely there.
Yes, occupying space and time.
Yeah.
In that exact moment, there is no version of reality that is more real than the one occurring. They were fully themselves in the present tense.
I have to admit, I struggle with this a bit.
It's hard.
When I hear this, my skeptical side flares up. Isn't this just the classic overused self-help phrase, you are enough, dressed up in thicker philosophical clothing?
Let's hear your thought process on that.
Well, let me try to break down how I'm hearing this. It sounds like the difference between looking at something and saying, this is a perfectly baked cake, which is an evaluation, right? A judgment about its crumb structure and flavor, versus just acknowledging the stubborn physical fact that a cake currently exists in front of me.
What's fascinating here is that the text specifically rejects the phrase, you are enough.
Wait, really? It rejects it?
Yes, if you think about you are enough, which we hear constantly in wellness spaces, it's actually a trap. It still contains a trace of measurement.
Oh, because enough implies a threshold.
Right, it begs an exhausting series of questions. Enough for what? By whose standard have you been deemed enough? Are you enough for this corporate job? Are you enough for society's beauty standards? Are you enough for your partner's expectations?
Wow. Even the word enough leaves the ruler on the table. It still implies that someone, somewhere, is holding a clipboard and checking off a box.
The clipboard is very much still in the room. But ontological perfection, that perfectus kind of completeness, it kicks the clipboard out entirely.
There's no more clipboard.
None. It is not a matter of sufficiency or passing a test. It is simply the unarguable, concrete fact that the being exists and is real. The being who is actively going through the messy process of growing is already whole. The completeness is the foundation, not the finish line.
Okay, but if perfection simply means existing, if it's just the baseline fact that I am completely real in this exact second, why does my brain fight it tooth and nail?
That's the big question.
Because I know for you listening, and definitely for me, the second someone says you are perfect as you are, my mind immediately unrolls a massive scroll of evidence to the contrary.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, hold on, I made that huge mistake last week. I have a terrible habit of interrupting people. I completely lost my temper yesterday.
That mental scroll is what the source material calls the ledger. We all carry this automatic grammar of self-assessment around with us.
The ledger. I like that.
The human mind reaches for the accounting book before it can even stop itself. It's an evolutionary habit to scan for errors. But the vital distinction to make here is that the ledger is not the self. Think of it this way. The text says, a hammer is not the wall. The accounting of errors is not the person doing the accounting.
A hammer is not the wall. That's a great image.
The ledger is just a tool. And like any tool, it has utility, right? It is very useful for figuring out how to repair a relationship after you've caused harm, or how to better organize your finances.
Sure, practical stuff.
But it is incredibly destructive when applied to your fundamental nature. The self is the living entity that existed entirely intact prior to the very first entry ever written in that ledger.
That temporal struggle is so relatable. It's the core of the issue, right? We are constantly trapped in time. We measure our present, exhausted selves against what the essay describes as an imagined future self.
Yes, the ghost of who we could be.
We all know that version of ourselves. It's the optimized you. The one who wakes up at 5 a.m. without hitting snooze, who drinks a gallon of water a day.
Who never loses their patience in traffic.
Exactly. Who is perfectly healed and emotionally regulated. But here is my genuine pushback on this.
Go for it.
Don't I need that ghost? Doesn't that projection of the idealized future self provide the friction that actually motivates me to get out of bed and improve my life? If I drop the ideal, what keeps the engine running?
That is the ultimate trap of self-improvement. The text warns us that when you compare a living, breathing, biological organism, your current self, to a non-existent, non-breathing ideal, the living thing will always mathematically seem insufficient. It's a completely rigged game.
Because the imagined future self doesn't have a nervous system.
Exactly.
It doesn't get a bad night's sleep. It doesn't have to deal with a sudden drop in blood sugar.
The ideal does not breathe. It casts no shadow. The projection does not exist anywhere in reality. Only the present self is real. And because it is the only thing that actually exists, the present self is the whole self.
Wow.
You cannot measure a living thing against a phantom without diminishing the living thing. So the difficulty we have with self-acceptance isn't a philosophical failing, it's a time travel problem.
A time travel problem.
Yeah, we suffer from the inability to locate ourselves in the present moment. We choose instead to live perpetually in the anxious gap between the present and that imagined future.
So if I can't measure myself by my past ledger, and I can't measure myself by my future ghost, it leaves this massive quiet void in the middle. Like, what exactly is the I that is sitting here? What is the core thing we're actually talking about when we say I am perfect? Here's where it gets really interesting. The text brings in this concept of the witness.
Right. And it's an idea that spans across centuries of contemplative traditions. In Vedantic philosophy, you find the Sakshi, the witness consciousness, that simply observes your thoughts without being defined or contaminated by them.
Yeah, just watching them go by.
Exactly. In Buddhist practice, mindfulness cultivates the ability to watch mental events arise and pass away without grabbing onto them. In Stoicism, you have the internal governing faculty that observes its own impressions of the world.
So to make sure I'm getting this, it makes me think of a massive movie theater.
Okay, I like where this is going.
If my mind makes a terrible, flawed decision, or if I'm suddenly hit with an overwhelming wave of anxiety, The witness to that experience is like the blank screen in the theater. The
Yes.
projector can throw a high-speed car chase, a tragic breakup, or a massive explosion onto that screen. It can be a terrifying, chaotic movie, but the screen itself is never burned by the explosion. It's never damaged by the tragedy. The fabric of the screen remains completely intact beneath the chaotic light. Is that the layer of perfection the text is naming?
That is exactly it. And this raises an important question about how we live our lives. The tragic flaw of the human condition is how easily we identify with the explosion instead of the screen.
We think we are the
We
explosion.
think we are the errors. We think we are the anxiety attack. We become entirely mesmerized by the contents of our lives, the plot of the movie. But the witnessing layer, the sheer capacity to perceive, cannot be flawed in any ordinary sense.
Yeah.
It is the indestructible ground from which the experience is happening.
So when you say I am perfect as I am,
You aren't claiming that the contents of your life, your bank account, your relationship history, your daily habits are flawless. You are making a claim about the unshakable nature of that witness. The one who made the errors is real. The errors themselves are real and have consequences. But the underlying presence, perceiving it all, has never been damaged.
recognizing that indestructible core naturally triggers some major alarm bells for people, especially regarding morality.
Oh, absolutely.
If I truly internalize that my core is perfect and fundamentally undamaged, the immediate cynical fear is that I get a free pass. Does this mean I can just be a completely selfish person, act terribly to people around me, and just shrug and say, hey, I'm ontologically perfect, deal with it?
Well, that fear comes from confusing ontological status with ethical responsibility. The text is clear here. Wholeness confers presence, not permission.
Presence, not permission.
The fact that your fundamental being is whole does not exempt you from the laws of cause and effect. It does not erase the relational obligations you have to your family or your community. The text uses this really striking imagery. Quote, "A river in flood is perfectly itself and still capable of destruction."
Right. A river in flood is a completely authentic, fully realized force of nature. But it is still washing away homes and destroying a town. You still have to deal with the wreckage it leaves behind.
Exactly. Being completely whole simply means you are fully here, inhabiting reality. It doesn't mean you are excused from cleaning up the mess you made.
Which leads right into the psychological objection. On behalf of anyone listening who is highly driven, ambitious, and maybe a little hard on themselves.
So that's right.
If I wake up and fully accept myself right now, if I drop the ledger entirely, my immediate fear is that I'm just going to become complacent. I picture myself sitting on the couch, eating junk food, and never achieving another goal. Doesn't a little bit of healthy shame or intense self-critique keep us moving forward? Without the whip, does the horse run?
It's a total reversal of that logic. Across both clinical therapeutic settings and ancient contemplative traditions, the text argues that shame is a terrible engine for sustainable growth.
It doesn't work.
Shame does not produce evolution. It produces paralysis. It produces repetition. When you fundamentally hate yourself, your nervous system perceives a threat to its core identity, and you hide. You repeat the exact same destructive behaviors because you literally cannot bear to look closely at the root of them.
Because if I look closely at my failure, and my core identity is tied to being a good or successful person, the failure doesn't just mean I made a mistake. It means I am a mistake. The pain of that is too immense to face.
That's it exactly. The stakes are too high. Radical self-acceptance, on the other hand, produces what therapists often call spaciousness. It creates room in your nervous system.
Room to fail.
Yes, the psychological safety to try doing things differently and the room to fail without that failure triggering a catastrophic interpretation of your own worth. A person who knows they are complete at the root doesn't have to spend massive amounts of energy hiding behind distortions. They can finally afford to look clearly at their bad habits or their toxic relationship patterns.
Because their fundamental value as a living being isn't on the line.
The person who believes they are deeply flawed cannot afford to see clearly. But the whole person can look at anything.
So what does this all mean? If radical self-acceptance is actually the prerequisite for real, lasting, positive change, why is every single message we receive in modern society structured to teach us the exact opposite?
It's a great question.
Why are we bombarded from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep with the subtle and sometimes overt message that we are broken?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the structural machinery behind the messaging. There is an enormous, heavily funded, internal economy of self-lack.
Economy of self-lack.
The pervasive feeling of insufficiency that so many of us carry doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is actively produced, carefully maintained, and heavily profited from by massive systems that absolutely require you to feel perpetually insufficient.
Right, because if I wake up feeling perfectly whole, I am a terrible customer.
You are the worst
Yeah.
possible customer. Entire consumer economies require a human being who is always almost whole. Just one expensive skincare routine away from feeling beautiful, one productivity app away from finally getting their life together.
Yeah, always chasing that next fix.
And certain religious institutions require a being who is inherently fallen or irreparably damaged, someone who needs ongoing repair through the mediation of that specific institution. Even the wellness and therapeutic industries can inadvertently reproduce this exact same structure.
The underlying marketing message is consistently, there's a deep flaw within you, and the only path to wholeness runs exclusively through our specific retreat or our patented method.
Exactly. So the text makes this incredibly radical argument. It states, a self-sovereign being is an extremely poor consumer of lack.
Let me stop you there. Are we basically saying that deeply believing I am perfect as I am is essentially a boycott? Like an active withdrawal of consent from entire industries designed to sell us the cure to a manufactured problem?
I am absolutely affirming that. It's not just a spiritual stance. It is a refusal to participate in the ongoing project of manufactured insufficiency. None of these systems benefit from a person who is genuinely at peace with their own completeness. If you don't experience the manufactured problem of being fundamentally flawed, you simply do not need the product.
Wow.
You just need the quiet capacity to locate that undamaged witnessing layer of yourself, the screen beneath the movie, and name it honestly.
So when you step out of that marketplace entirely, when you withdraw your consent from the endless economy of lack, what are you actually left with?
Wow.
Because according to the philosophy we're exploring today, the endpoint isn't a loud celebration. It is a very specific kind of silence.
And it is vital to distinguish what kind of silence this is. Because if you are aggressively performing self-acceptance, like if you are standing in front of the mirror, white-knuckling the sink, and shouting affirmations at your reflection,
Which is exhausting.
it is, and you are still heavily engaged in a debate. You are taking the side of the defense against an internal prosecution that hasn't yielded. The performance itself, the sheer volume of the affirmation, is evidence that the trial is still actively ongoing in your mind.
But the silence we are talking about here isn't the silence of losing the argument. It's the silence of a case that has simply been thrown out of court.
The gavel comes down,
Uh-huh.
and the trial is dismissed due to a lack of standing. The question of your adequacy is no longer open for debate, not because you finally proved you were good enough, but because you realized the entire premise of the courtroom was absurd.
For you listening, this means that stating, I am perfect as I am, doesn't actually answer the exhausting question of whether you are adequate. It dissolves the question entirely. It recognizes that am I enough is a loaded question designed to keep you running on a treadmill that never stops.
It just drops the whole case.
When you step off the treadmill and return to the ground that was always there, the sheer, unargued physical and conscious fact of your existence, you realize something profound. You are not finished. You are not optimal. You are simply complete.
You are a specific arrangement of awareness and matter occurring right now, and that occurrence is absolute.
We've spent this time focused on how this transforms our relationship with ourselves, dropping our own ledgers. But I want to leave you with a different angle to mull over as you step back into your day. A final thought that builds on everything we've talked about.
I love this part.
If you were to successfully drop the internal debate about your own adequacy right now, if that massive, exhausting mental ledger just vanished, what would you suddenly have the energy to do with the rest of your day?